Discover the surprising military careers of these famous stars. Chuck Norris served in the U.S. Air Force as an air policeman. Robert Duvall served in the U.S. Army, reaching the rank of Private First Class. Tom Selleck was an infantryman in the U.S. Army National Guard. During his time in the U.S. Army, Clint Eastwood served as a swimming instructor. Morgan Freeman served in the U.S. Air Force as a radar technician. The king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, served as a U.S. Army armor crewman. Gal Gadot served for 2 years in the Israel Defense Forces as a combat instructor. Jeff Bridges served in the U.S. Coast Guard Reserve as a boatswain's mate. In Trincada, B. Arthur was one of the first members of the Women's Reserve, serving as a truck driver in the Marine Corps. Arnold Schwarzenegger served in the Austrian Army, where he was a tank driver. Before his publishing empire, Hugh Hefner served in the U.S. Army as an infantry clerk. The iconic voice of Darth Vader, James Earl Jones, was a Ranger School instructor in the U.S. Army. Legendary host Bob Barker trained as a U.S. fighter pilot during World War II. Famed dancer Gene Kelly served in the U.S. Navy's photographic section. Comedian Drew Carey served in the U.S. Marine Corps as a radio operator. Hollywood legend Kirk Douglas was a communications officer in the U.S. Navy. Comedy icon Mel Brooks served as a combat engineer in the U.S. Army. Queen Elizabeth joined the British Army Auxiliary as a mechanic and truck driver. Tony Curtis served in the U.S. Navy aboard a submarine tender. Prince Harry served in the British Army as an Apache helicopter pilot. Before his acting career, Adam Driver was an infantryman in the U.S. Marine Corps. The legendary singer Tony Bennett served as a U.S. Army infantryman. Harvey Keitel served as an infantryman in the U.S. Marine Corps. Hollywood star Jimmy Stewart had a long career as a bomber pilot in the U.S. Army Air Forces. Comedian Rob Riggle retired from the U.S. Marine Corps as a lieutenant colonel. Actor Henry Fonda served as an intelligence officer in the U.S. Navy. Singer-songwriter Chris Christopherson was a helicopter pilot in the U.S. Army. In Trincada, Michael Caine served as an infantryman in the British Army's Royal Fusiliers. Mr. T was a member of the Military Police Corps in the U.S. Army. Before he was Alan Seven, Sean Connery was a sailor in the British Royal Navy. Alan Alda served as an artilleryman in the U.S. Army Reserve. The King of Hollywood, Clark Gable, served as an aerial gunner in the U.S. Army Air Forces. Montel Williams had a long career in the U.S. Navy as an intelligence officer. Ed McMahon was a U.S. Marine Corps fighter pilot with a service spanning decades. Mickey Rooney entertained troops as part of the U.S. Army's radio entertainment unit. In Trincada, comedian George Carlin served in the U.S. Air Force as a radar technician. Paul Newman served in the U.S. Navy as a radioman. The musician Shaggy served in the U.S. Marine Corps in a field artillery unit. In Trincada, director Oliver Stone's experiences as a U.S. Army infantryman heavily influenced his films. Charles Bronson served in the U.S. Army Air Forces as a B-29 gunner. Johnny Cash served in the U.S. Air Force as a Morse code operator. Hollywood legend Humphrey Bogart served as a seaman in the U.S. Navy. Guitar legend Jimi Hendrix was a paratrooper in the U.S. Army. Gene Hackman served in the U.S. Marine Corps as a radio operator. Decorated veteran Charles Durning served as a B-29 tail gunner in the U.S. Army Air Forces. And comedy pioneer Sid Caesar served as a musician in the U.S. Coast Guard. Betty White served in the U.S. Army Auxiliary as a volunteer driver. Rod Serling, creator of The Twilight Zone, was a paratrooper in the U.S. Army. Singer and activist Harry Belafonte served as a munitions loader in the U.S. Navy. Which story surprised you the most? Comment and subscribe for more.